Let's actually continue, okay? Now, this was the easy case, okay? So this is actually because when new firms entered, but it was very important for you to understand the dynamics, okay, what's going on. Now we're going to have a case. We are not going to have the constant cost industries, but we're going to have increasing cost industries, okay? Instead of this, we're going to have increasing costs. So remember we talked, why do you think cost might increase, right? So it's basically increasing. So this is going to be the second one, and it's going to be now entry and exit, it affects, okay? So let's actually write this down. So entry of new firms will increase cost. So let's write this, of course, and we're going to erase this. Okay, so basically this is going to be. Now, why do you think, remember we talked about one possible reason why entry of new firms might increase costs. You said, hocam, there might be, inputs might be scarce, so there might be some competition, so input prices might increase, and that's why, right? That's why costs might increase, okay? So we say that entry of new firms, okay, causes average costs to increase. Okay, so one reason might be that. Can you think of another reason? For instance, let me help. Suppose you are at İzmit Körfezi, right? İzmit Bay. Okay, so for our international friends. So it's actually highly industrialized region. Okay, and it's highly industrialized, so there are some environmental issues. Okay, so suppose, like, let's say in the beginning there were 50 firms, you know, like around İzmit Körfezi, but now, like İzmit Bay area, but now let's say right now, like they're not 50, but now they're 100. Okay, so what happens is that there might be some, right, so they might contribute, and they do, to pollution, right? Environmental, they might, you know, contribute some sort of environmental concerns, okay? So basically they might cause pollution, and let's say for 50 firms, nature around İzmit Bay area could handle it, but not 100 firms. Then what happens? When there are some environmental concerns, when there are, you know, like, you know that these firms are polluting the environment, what do governments do? They usually put taxes, right? So these environmental taxes and such. So another reason might be that the input prices might not change, but because, you know, there are so many firms, that might require further regulations, okay? That might require further taxes. So that those might also increase costs, okay? So whatever the reason, entry of new firms, they're going to increase the costs, okay? So let's see what's going to happen, okay? Now here I'm going to draw 3 graphs, okay? I'm going to do the increasing cost industry, and I'm going to leave the decreasing cost to you guys, okay? To figure that out. And then you'll see that it's going to be very easy once we understood the logic. Now we're going to have 3 graphs. Again, this is going to be price, marginal costs, average costs. I'm going to put Q. And I'm going to put here, again, this is going to be for firm, price, marginal cost, average cost, and this is going to be Q. I'm going to say firm before entry, okay? And I'm going to say firm after entry. After entry. Yes, so we're going to draw 3 graphs, okay? And then this is going to be, as you said, you can guess, market, okay? Average cost, and this is going to be for market, okay? And then we're going to link all of these points to each other, okay? Remember, what were we doing? Whenever we draw these, we draw the initial case first, right? So basically, the initial long-run equilibrium we draw. So let's do that. So initially, you guys now know what should be the case. If it's long run, what should be the case? Where should the equilibrium price be? Where should it be? It should be, but what is P0, right? It doesn't mean, right? So what is, it should be, so I'm going to draw the, right, again, the cost curves. So the minimum of the long run average cost curve, right, is going to be the prevailing long run price, right? So let's do that. And then we're going to, again, write down the what's going on there, okay? So let me draw this long run average cost. Remember, from the minimum, we have long run marginal cost. And then remember, we said that the short run marginal cost is going to be steeper, right? It's something like this, short run marginal cost. But we know that initial long run equilibrium is E0. We put it here, P0, but this is minimum of long run average cost, right? And then we put Q0 here. And then we know that it's the, you know, like the Q star, which minimizes the long run average cost, okay? Then I take this to, I know that if this is the long run equilibrium and this is the short run, initial short run equilibrium, I go here. So I say P0, and then I'm going to have my, so I'll be clever, this is going to be my demand curve. And I know that this is going to be the supply short run, right? This also corresponds to E0. In the market, we know that firms entered, exit, whatever, some stuff happened, and then they reached zero profits. And then initially we start here, okay? So this is, let's say, Q0, okay? Now this is the initial case, so let's write this down. Initial long run and short run equilibrium is E0. We know that initial price in long run equilibrium is P0, which is equal to the minimum of long run average costs, right? And then we know that individual firms are producing Q0, which is equal to, we know that Q min, so let's write this. So this is nothing but Q star minimum long run average cost, okay? And this is the case, so fine. Now, suppose, again, demand increases. So unless there is some force, this is going to stay like this, right? This is not going to change. Now, suppose, again, incomes increase, and suppose our demand increases to D prime, okay? So let's say we have something like this, D prime, okay? Then what's going to happen? You said that, hocam, this is the short run supply curve. So this is going to be, let's call it E short run if you want, okay? So then this is going to be the new price. Then what's going to happen is that you would go here, short run marginal cost, right? Price equals to, so let's put this P, let's call it P1 if you want, okay? So this is P1, so we come here, so this is P1. This is going to be Q1, right? So this is, you call it E short run, so this is, that point is somewhere here, right? E short run. Then what happens? Suddenly now there's extra demand, right? Demand increases, so the price in the market suddenly increases. Of course, firms started supplying more, and then they are making positive profits now, right? So similar story, nothing is different. Suppose D moves to there, so we know that price increases to P1, right? And then we know that firms start making positive profits, right? So this is what happens. But we know what's going to happen. When firms start making positive profits, what will happen? So this is short run, right? So this is the transitionary period. So what happens? So firms start making positive profit. What's going to happen? New firms will enter, right? New firms start entering. But now, something is different. Now, as these new firms come, what happens? Costs are increasing, right? So I cannot use these old cost curves. I have to use the new cost curves, right? So what's going to happen? Of course, that's also not going to happen immediately. One firm enters, cost curves raise a little bit, right? And then another firm enters, so it's also going to happen gradually, right? But suppose in the end, we're going to have, so let's have this. So this was the short run so that I can actually, okay, so this is going to be, okay, so I should be careful so that we would have the nice graph. So I'm going to have, so these cost curves move up. So let's say they're going to be somewhere here, okay? So I'm going to call them long run average cost prime, okay? So these are the new cost curves. I'm going to have long run marginal cost prime, and then I'm going to also have short run marginal cost prime, okay? New firms start entering, cost curves start to shift, right? Or start to increase if you want, okay? So the average cost curves, okay? The average cost curves, they start to shift, okay? So basically, so now we have new ones, long run average cost prime, long run marginal cost prime, and then basically short run marginal cost prime, obviously, okay? So all these cost curves, and then this point is going to be what? It's going to be our new long run equilibrium, right? So that's going to be where it's going to be this time going to be equal to the price, which is the minimum of these new average cost curves, right? So basically, so this is going to be the case. So let's call this P2. So this is going to be minimum long run average cost prime, okay? These new guys. And then this is going to be, we don't know, so let's call this Q2, okay? Now, okay, so this is basically the case. And then, so this is going to be, so let's put it, so this is where, so, but as you know, like as new firms start entering, right, we know that this guy would start shifting as well, right, to the right, that you know. So this is going to, so I have to be careful. This is going to be P2. This is going to be somewhere here, as you see, okay? Or let's put it like this. It's going to be somewhere here. So you see that this supply short run prime. So it's going to shift, right? It will keep shifting. As new firms enter, this short run supply curve will start shifting. Also, these cost curves will start going upwards, okay? And then, so this is going to be, let's call this E2, okay? And that is going to be my new long run equilibrium. Let's call this Q2, okay? So let's continue. Cost curves start to shift, okay? And then short run supply will shift until profits are stored back to zero, okay? So those firms enter enough. And then, so we're going to have E2 will be the new long run equilibrium, okay? And you know in the new long run equilibrium, what is going to be the price? It's P2. You see, it's no longer P0 because these cost curves went up. Now the minimum is now higher, right? Now, if I combine this time, if I combine these points, suppose I keep doing this for all the long run points. So you see, I combine them. This is my long run supply, okay? You see it's upward sloping. So this is, and now you know the reason. Hocam, of course, the minimum of these guys was here. Now they go up. Of course, the new long run equilibrium is going to be, right, somewhere up higher here. So it's called, you can call it E2, okay? So this is going to be the long run supply. So did you get this? Is it clear? Now can you tell me if it's decreasing cost industries, what's going to happen? Then in which cases that could happen? Decreasing cost industries. New firms enter, now the average costs fall. Now you're going to, if you insert here, you should draw them down, right, below. Then, in which cases do you think that's possible?
When the capacity is there?
Yeah, so for instance, suppose you were let's think of again like the Izmit Bay area, right? So suppose you were the only 2 firms there, 3 firms there. Back then, that area was not industrialized. Maybe the infrastructure was not very good, right? Altyapı wasn't enough, right? So then your cost might be higher, but as new firms enter, maybe the government or the municipality, they are going to invest in infrastructure, right? They're going to build up a better road. They're going to provide, better electricity, right? So then those might decrease your costs. So always just think of it, or even in terms of the labor market, that could happen. If one industry becomes popular, some, labor might shift from other parts to those industries. Maybe it's easier to find, labor in that industry, okay? But no matter what the reason is, if there are decreasing, we call it, if we have decreasing cost industries, then what's going to happen? As new firms enter, these guys would go down. Then the new point, instead of here, it's going to be here, right? And then you're going to have a downward sloping supply curve. So you see, there are 3 cases. The long run supply curve can be horizontal, perfectly elastic. It can be upward sloping when there is increasing cost industries, or it can be downward sloping when there are decreasing cost industries. Okay? So just keep that in your mind. It's very important. Yes? Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Of course, but it might be, they might increase taxes on consumption goods, but not particularly to those, on the firms in that industry, right? So you don't know, right? So, I don't think when they make Karadeniz Sahil Yolu, right? So there's the Black Sea. So he was asking, Hocam, if they're going to invest in infrastructure, aren't they going to raise taxes? But it might not be necessarily that they raise taxes for those firms in that industry, right? Maybe they benefit and they raise taxes, for consumers, or they raise taxes, income taxes, okay, somewhere else, okay? So this is,
Silicon Valley in the US.
Yeah. So this is basically, okay, so just keep this in your mind. But you see, did you get the logic? It's very important how these long run dynamics, this stuff works. But you see that you can, even with those are limited amount of graphs and curves, you see that we can actually say what's going on, okay? And again, as I said that, now I kept my promise. Now you know the long run supply curve as well, okay? You see it's coming from a little bit of a different structure than the short run, okay? So the logic is very much the same, but in the long run there is this entry and exit business, and you see that it affects a lot, okay? Now what we will do while we have talked about taxes, so this kind of completes the long run. Again, as I said, that you can actually have the decrease in cost industries. Try it at home, and then you're going to have a long run supply curve, which is downward sloping, okay? Now, what we will do is that this is actually important, following up your friend's question. Whenever the government is introducing, now this kind of covers the perfectly competitive market, right? We know what's going to happen in the short run. We know what's going to happen in the long run, in different situations, what's going to happen. But another important thing is at the end of the day, you might want to come up with some policy recommendations. And, what we hear most in our lives, right? Or on TV is basically, what's going to happen to taxes? Will they increase? So it's very important how, to analyze what is going to be the, like the, basically, who's going to, how the burden is going to be shared, okay, whenever there's a tax which is introduced, okay? And you see that all the concepts that we have learned is very much related to especially elasticity. So we didn't learn it for no reason, just because it's nicely not nice. Maybe it's like it's an abstract concept. But you see that for taxes it's very crucial and very important. So let's actually do that now. We'll see very lastly is that this is called the tax incidence. Okay, it means that who is going to pay the tax? Who's going to have the most burden bear? This is what, like the burden, like the larger share of this tax is basically covered by, which group? Consumers or producers, okay? Doesn't matter, like whom the tax is put on. You'll see that the real effect, like the real burden, now we're going to see, okay? So basically, let's call this, so this is the, and again, we're going to solve a problem, numerical problem, showing during our review session, showing the tax, like incidence, okay, who's bearing the most burden, and that's basically, that's going to be basically it, okay? Now, but before this, probably you have seen this, but very simply, let me remind you this, okay? So from now on, whenever you see another market structure, it will always be compared to the perfect competition case, okay? Whether it's a monopoly, whether it's some other, market structure, it will always be compared to the perfect competition case. And you're going to hear this, that perfectly competitive markets are efficient, okay? So here, the word efficiency, it means that basically the surplus to the society, okay, is maximized under perfect competition, okay? So what do we mean by this? So this is just a quick recap for, like your friends who have seen, and like also to introduce it for your friends who haven't taken any introductory econ course. In order to, so one of the questions, whenever there's a tax, for instance, remember, probably you keep hearing right now on the news that in Turkey there is this minimum wage, like issue going on. And that now the government is saying that, oh, we're not going to bear, like all the burden. The employers should also, take some of the burden as well, and such. So there is this, thing that who is suffering or who is benefiting the most from, like any change, okay? So then for these, in order to make these kind of analysis, we have to understand what's happening to the welfare of consumers and what's happening to the well-being of producers, okay? And there are different ways of measuring it. So the easiest way to measure is what we call consumer surplus and producer surplus, okay? And basically, suppose you have a demand curve like this, okay? And suppose you have a supply curve like this, okay? And we know that the market clearing price or the equilibrium price is going to be this, right? P star. So the consumer surplus is, very simply, is going to be the area below the demand curve, okay? And above the market clearing price, above the equilibrium price, okay? So basically this area we call consumer surplus, okay? And the idea is the following. It means that for these units, actually demand curve shows your willingness to pay. And for these units, you are actually willing to pay this much, but you buy it for this much, right? So this difference stays in your pocket, okay? Or it stays with you, okay? So you can think of it very simply like that. That's why this portion is called a surplus to the consumers. Similarly, this portion is going to be, so this is considered as a surplus for the producers, because this guy is willing to sell this unit at this price, right? But he is able to sell it at this price. So you see this much in between, and don't forget that this was his cost curve, right? Therefore, this much in between is in his pocket, right? This is extra for him. He enjoys it. This is what we call a surplus. So this part is producer surplus, okay? Now you'll see that if there are no taxes, perfectly competitive markets are able to generate the maximal amount of surplus to the society, okay? You see that because there is no such portion that is lost and goes to no one, okay? But you'll see when there's tax, there is some portion that goes to no one, and we're going to call it deadweight loss, okay? So now, as I said, that very, simply, we can define producer surplus and consumer surplus like this. But now let's talk about tax, okay? So who's going to, and you're going to see that the formulas that we derived will be very useful in determining who's going to bear the burden, the majority of the tax burden, okay? So let's write this, as I said, that tax incidence, but here we had consumer surplus, producer surplus. Now we want to know the effect of a per unit tax. So per unit tax is basically, for every unit, remember the government is taxing you. Let's say cigarettes, for every pack of cigarette you pay 1 Turkish lira tax, okay? So let's put it, it's T, okay? So when you introduce a tax, there will be a difference between price that demanders pay, buyers pay, right? And price that producers or sellers receive, right? Because you pay, let's say you bought a cigarette, right? So let's say you pay like 7 Turkish liras. So you pay 7 Turkish liras, but 1 Turkish lira goes to the government, so the guy receives 6 Turkish liras, right? So there's a gap between the price that consumers pay and the price that producers receive, okay? And the difference between them is going to be PS plus tax, right? This is what you pay, but the producer is going to get this much, okay? Now, so this is, you see that this is going to be important. So basically the difference between them, right? PD minus PS is going to be tax, whichever one you like, okay? Now let's have our demand function. So your demand function, your demand is going to be affected by how much you pay, right? And this is going to be the price that you pay. And the supplier's, producer's price is going to be affected by how much they receive, right? So how much they pay and how much they receive, these are going to give us quantities. So these should be equal to each other, okay? So now whenever, when we have a tax, so we know that in equilibrium, this should be the case, right? Quantity demanded should be equal to quantity supplied, okay? Now, let's differentiate this with respect to T. Differentiate, okay, with respect to T, okay? Let's do this. So keeping in mind that, this PS is either PD minus T or, whichever one you like, okay? So let's do that. So let's write that there. So instead of this, I write PD minus T, okay? So I differentiate. So I write this. So this is going to be the derivative of this, demand function with respect to P, right? And then we have dPD dt, okay? So T is tax, because later we might increase the tax amount or decrease the tax amount, okay? That's why we look at this derivative. So, and don't forget that these are equilibrium values, so they're going to change, right? If you introduce a tax, these equilibrium levels will change, okay? So this is going to, that's why when I increase my tax by 1 unit, how would price consumers pay change, okay? This is what it means. And then here I have SP, okay? And then here I have dpd dt, right? So here I have, and then derivative of t with respect to t is what? 1, right? So this is minus 1. Now, if I just arrange everything, sp dpd dt minus sp, okay? dpd dt, okay? So this is basically, so I just combine, so this is sp is equal to sp minus dp, right? dpd dt, and from here I get dpd dt is equal to sp divided by sp minus dp, okay? So you see that from here I found this. So when tax rate changes, how much this guy is going to be affected, right? How much consumers pay is going to be affected depending on these factors. SP, right? This derivative, SP dP, okay? Apparently this. Now I do this. So it's going to be familiar. I write P over Q here. And also I write P over Q here, and I write P over Q here, okay? So this is the derivative of QS, right? SP is this, QS, this P, right? And then, so then I multiply P over Q. What is this? So this was SP. Now this becomes what? SP times. This is elasticity, right? This is elasticity of supply, right? So let's call it ES. And this is what? Elasticity of demand. Now you see that dpd dt is equal to elasticity of supply minus elasticity of demand. Now you see how much us consumers are going to be affected depends very much on the elasticities, okay? So look at this. So this is going to be, so let's think of it like this. So when tax increases, what's going to happen to PD? What is this? What is the sign of this? This is, what is the elasticity of supply? Actually, you're right. So you see, we saw that even it could be the slope could be negative, right? Supply curve, but suppose it's upward sloping, you know, like the typical stuff that we have. So this is mostly positive, right? This is mostly positive. This is mostly negative, as we know. So this whole thing is mostly positive. So when tax increases, of course, what consumers will pay will increase, okay? Definitely. So similarly, we can do this. We can do the same for the supply as well, okay? So we can write this, dps dt is equal to, so very similarly we can write this, okay? This is going to be ed es minus ed, okay? And then what is this? You said, hocam, this part is positive mostly. This is negative. So apparently this is negative. So what does that mean? It means that when tax increases, right? When tax rate, this per unit tax increases, the amount that producers receive is going to decrease, right? So this is basically the case. Fine. Now, okay, so these are, as I said, important. Now, actually, let me tell you this, and then we'll be done and we'll just start solving problems, okay? Now, let me ask you this. So just some remarks, okay? So let's have some remarks or some observations, okay? The first one. Now, suppose if ED is 0, what does this mean? If elasticity of demand, right, is, price elasticity of demand is 0, what does that mean? It is perfectly inelastic, right? So nothing changes, right? So basically, so this is perfectly inelastic. Then who is, you know, paying the majority of the tax actually in real terms, right? Who is, if you just check, so let's basically look at this, dpd dt, right? So this is very useful. ES and then we have ES minus ED, right? So if this is, so let's put it like this. So let's write this, right? So bless you, right? So ED is 0, right? And ES over ES is going to be 1. So who is paying all the tax? So whenever there's a 1 Turkish lira increase, let's say in tax on cigarettes, who is paying all of this tax? Consumer, right? So the price that they are paying, it goes one to one, right? So to there, you see? So this is what you probably learned in your introductory classes. Whoever is more inelastic is paying the majority of the, is bearing the tax burden, the majority of the tax burden, okay? In this case, consumers are perfectly inelastic, so this is, what they do, they pay all the tax, basically, okay? So let's say tax is paid completely by the consumers, okay? So the second one, if, let's have this. What is this? So if the demand elasticity is minus infinity, what is it?
Perfectly inelastic.
It is perfectly elastic, right? So this is demand is perfectly elastic. Then who is paying the majority of the burden? DT, so let's say ES, right? ES minus ED. Basically, this ED is minus infinity, so some number divided by infinity, this is going to be 0. Therefore, tax is, and if you just put it here, for the suppliers, this is minus infinity, and then you also have minus infinity, so if you take the limit, it's going to be 1, right? So you see that the tax is paid completely, so in this case, tax is completely paid by the consumers. Here, paid completely by the producers. Okay? So we have a nice expression which we were able to get through these guys, okay? Which I can write maybe here, that if you want to compare or let's put it here. So I'll just write this, okay? So these were just remarks. Now I'm going to make a nice, like using all these stuff. So we have this, basically, dPS dt minus dPd dt is equal to minus ED over ES. You can get it very easily, the denominators cancel out. You see that whenever there is an increase in tax, how much it's going to increase price that demand, like consumers pay, or price that producers receive, how much these guys would be affected depends inversely on the elasticities, right? So if demand is more elastic than supply, you see who's paying more? The producers, right? If demand is less elastic than supply, who is paying more than the consumers, right? So this is actually very nice where you can figure what's going on, okay, in terms of the elasticities, okay? So if I want to draw this as a graph, so I'll do this and then it will be over, then we're going to solve problems, okay? So basically, so let me, So it's because of these, this is negative, right? So this is positive, so it would be a positive number. I mean, you don't have to, of course, okay? But there is this, you see that when T increases, this guy increases. When T increases, this guy decreases, right? So this is negative, this is positive. So that's why, to get a positive number, you're right. You can get rid of the minuses if you want, okay? And then let me put it on a graph. So let's write it like this. So sometimes this is called the welfare analysis. Welfare analysis of tax, okay? As I said that there are many ways of measuring welfare. The easiest way of measuring it is through these consumer surplus, producer surplus. But basically we have this. I have my price here. I have my quantity here. So this is going to be D. And this is my supply. This is my demand. And suppose this is the initial equilibrium. So this is going to be Q star, okay? So when you put a tax, let's say you put a tax on cigarettes, okay? So what's going to happen is that you're going to S, you can call it S with tax, okay? Now what happens is that now this, you see whatever they were supplying, before, in order to supply Q star units, they were okay if they have gotten P star. But now, in order to supply Q star units, because the government is going to put 1 Turkish lira tax on every single unit, they would ask for more, okay? So basically, this is the difference. But you see that the new equilibrium is going to be somewhere here. So this T is kind of shared, right, between consumers and producers. So basically, we put PD here, okay? So this is basically, sorry, so let's put it like this. So this is the new equilibrium, so this is PD, okay? So, and then we go down in here, so this is also T, okay? And this is PS. So this in between, so this is going to be Q with tax. Okay, so the new equilibrium is going to be here, E with tax, if you want, okay? So you see that this is how we show per unit tax. So it doesn't matter on which, like side you put the tax on also. But you see that, and then we show this. You see now, when there's a tax, what is the change in consumer surplus after tax? Can you tell me, what is the change in consumer surplus? Remember, consumer surplus initially was here. The area, suppose it goes, the area below the demand curve and above the market clearing price. Okay, suppose it was that. So this was the consumer surplus before. Now PD is this, now this is the consumer surplus. So what is the change? Which area is the change? This. Right, so here, so this is basically, let's label these. Let's call this H, for instance. Let's call this G, okay? So basically, this is what? P, D, right? E, so let's not call it E with tax because it's going to be hard. So let's call this F, okay? So P, D, right? P, D, F, H, P star. Plus, so this area and plus this little triangle here, FHE, is the change in consumer surplus, right? It decreased by this much. Now, after tax, so what is the change in producer surplus? Producer surplus was this area before, right? Here. But now it's this area. So again, this trapezoid in between is lost, right? So basically, what is it? So it's P star H G P S, right? Plus H E G. Okay. So how much did the government collect? How much taxes government collected in this case? Can you tell me? Right, so this area went to the government, right? This is the quantity, and this is the amount of tax, right? Whatever T. So T times this part went to the government completely, right? So I know that this guy went to the government from consumers, and this guy went to the government from producers. But what happened to these guys? Who got them? No one, right? So this is what we call the deadweight loss, okay? Basically, that these, due to the tax, so whenever you put a tax, you see that competitive market was working perfectly, and it was generating the maximum amount of surplus to the society. Now you introduce the tax, right? And then you distorted this market, and then you actually introduce some deadweight loss. Okay, so basically it's called, so these guys are called deadweight loss. Okay, so these guys, deadweight loss. Okay, this is a loss to the society, and mostly we show it like this. Okay, but of course this is true, you're going to hear this a lot, but of course this is true if there are no, for instance, externalities in this market. Okay, so if there are no, everything is working perfectly, no externalities. Externalities mean that dışsallık. So whenever you do something, you produce at İzmit Bay area, but you pollute the bay, right? So there is some cost, and sometimes you do not include this environmental cost in your cost structure as a firm. Then, putting a tax is not always, inefficient. Okay, so you should keep that in your mind. Now, during the continuation of these micro courses, you're going to see all of these. Okay, so just keep in your mind that, okay, we always compare it to perfectly competitive case, and we say perfectly competitive case is the efficient one, is the best one, but it depends, right? If there are some externalities, and if sometimes firms are not internalizing some environmental costs, some stuff. Okay, so these are very important. Then putting a tax might achieve efficiency. Okay, not putting a tax is inefficient, but putting a tax is efficient. Okay, so don't always think that taxes are bad, they're distorting stuff. That's not actually the case. If there are some, as I said, that for instance, there are some cases where there are externalities and such. Okay, so just keep that in your mind. So this kind of completes our analysis of the perfectly competitive market. Okay, and then during our review session, we're going to solve some problems. Okay, also related to that. Okay, so thank you for the semester. Thanks a lot. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the class, but I mean, even if you think that it's too much math and too abstract, just believe me that these actually constitute a great basis for all the economics that you're going to learn. Okay, so but thanks a lot for the great semester. Okay, thank you.